Hello everyone and welcome to episode number 15 of No Whining. Hope you're doing terrific wherever you might be. We are starting today's episode with a wine that is actually non-vintage. Now there's almost always a vintage year associated with a wine, but occasionally, as is the case in a place like Champagne in particular, it's very challenging to grow grapes there because of the climate and to have any level of consistency in the ripeness level of the grapes. And so what happens is you have a blending of different vintages to ensure that you have consistency in the product and that you have the right ripeness so that you have a really, really great wine that you end up with. And so again, they will mix and match different vintage years to come out with the final product. Now, occasionally there are exceptional growing seasons and growing years. It happens 2, 3, 4 times in a decade where they will actually make what's called vintage champagne and they will actually have a vintage year on it. But that is the exception. It is certainly not the rule. Now, the wine we're tasting today is a Laurent Perrachon Crémant de Bourgogne. That's a mouthful, right? And this is coming from Beaujolais, which is within the larger Burgundy region of France. A Crémant is a sparkling wine made in France, but from outside the region of Champagne. If it's made anywhere other than Champagne, it can't actually be called Champagne. And as a matter of fact, we probably should stop calling it Champagne in America. Putting the pain in Champagne is not necessary. But you do have to know some things. You can't call it champagne if it's a sparkling wine, or as I like to call it, a sparkler from California, or even from God's country here in Texas. You can't call it champagne. And frankly, we should stop calling it by that name anyway, because it's pronounced closer along the lines of champagne. Champagne, it's not champagne. Now with this wine coming from Burgundy, this style of Crémant is most similar to Champagne. This sparkling wine in particular is a Blanc de Blanc, is what it's called. And what that literally means is white from white. Because you can have white sparkling wine that is not made from white grapes. You can actually have it made from something like Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, right? And those are both red grapes, but they make white sparkling wine. Well, this being a Blanc de Blanc, it's made from white grapes. If it was made from red, it would be called Blanc de Noir, literally white from black. Or you could have a rosé, right? A rosé sparkling wine, or Champagne or Crémant in this case. Now, because this is a wine coming out of Burgundy, just knowing that title of Blanc de Blanc, we're going to know exactly what grape variety was used to make this wine. Here's why. In Burgundy, all the red wines, all the red Burgundies, it's made out of Pinot Noir. All the white wines, or white Burgundies, are made out of Chardonnay. So we know that this is 100% Chardonnay. As far as food, my suggestion, have this wine with fish. Have this wine with chips. Have this wine with fish and chips. Okay, these grapes were hand-picked and then hand-selected from 30-year-old vines grown in clay and limestone soils, and spent 10 months aging on the lees before disgorgement. Now, this leads into an interesting conversation, a very important one, about the traditional method and what that means. Because what we start with, in order to make a sparkling wine, we take a base wine, and then we allow it to ferment, for fermentation to take place. In other words, the yeast eat up all the sugar, and then you have alcohol come out on the other side, and you wind up with a base wine where the alcohol is around 11%. And what you do is you take that base wine, and this is a complex process, right? You take it and you put it in wine bottles, and they have to be thick wine bottles because there's a lot of pressure inside. You can't use a normal wine bottle or they will explode, all right? So you put the wine in bottles, and then what you do is you add in just a little bit of sugar and a little bit of yeast. And this is called liqueur de tirage, all right? And when you add in a little bit of sugar and a little bit of yeast, what happens is in the bottle, a second fermentation takes place. Okay, because again, the yeast start to eat the sugar, and what that does is it produces an extra percentage to a percentage and a half of alcohol, and a byproduct of that is CO2. All right, but because this is all happening in the bottle, the CO2 has nowhere to go. And so what it does is it actually just goes into the wine itself, and that's how you end up with that nice fine mousse, those wonderful bubbles when we're talking about sparkling wines. Now there is a much simpler way to do all of this, and that is by using what is called the tank method. In the tank method, all the second fermentation takes place in giant tanks, right? And so it's much simpler, it's much cheaper, it takes a lot less time, but what you don't end up with is, again, those really, really nice fine bubbles that just make it have such a wonderful texture. A sparkling wine, like this, like a Crémant or a Champagne, you don't get that with tank method. What you get is something like the wines, like a Prosecco. You have much bigger bubbles, so it's still sparkling, but it doesn't have the same texture on the jaws. All right, the next step is once all the yeast have eaten up all the sugar, well, there's nothing left to eat, and so they die. And the process of decomposition of the yeast in the wine is called autolysis, which is somewhat disgusting but true. But what it actually does is add some incredible flavors to the wine itself. It gives you these sort of doughy, yeasty, like bread and toast, those and biscuit, right? Like these wonderful types of flavors that you only get through this process. And that is what's referred to as aging on the lees. The lees are the yeast that have died, and the wine ages on them, and it adds in these wonderful, incredible flavors and just adds complexity to the wine. Now, there are different aging requirements depending on the area that this is done in. So in Champagne, right, like if you get a vintage champagne, if you will, the the minimum aging requirements for that wine to sit on the lees is going to be 3 years. For non-vintage champagne, it is going to be 1 year. But for Crémant, it is only 9 months. Now, a lot of producers will do it longer than that, as is the case, as I just told you with this one. It was actually aged on the lees for 12 months, but 9 months is the minimum. All right, moving on, we are almost there. The next part of this process is you have what's called riddling, and what this entails is the bottles are very, very slowly like rotated, very, very slowly, either by hand, in which case it's done by a riddler, like the Batman villain, okay? And the riddler is, or it can be done by machines, like I said, is turning the bottles until they are in a vertical position with the necks facing down. And what happens then? Well, slowly all those dead yeast cells are moving into the neck of the bottle. And once they have settled there, we go into the next part of the process, which is called disgorgement. And this entails freezing the end of the neck of the bottle where the lees are, where all those lees are. And what that does is it creates like a little plug of all the dead lees. And because the bottle at this point only has a crown cap, which is similar to a beer bottle cap on it, that cap is then flipped off. Because of all the pressure that's in the bottle itself, the lees in that little plug fly out of the bottle, and then very quickly a machine is going to add in just a tiny bit of wine and a little bit of sugar. Now, this little bit of sugar that is added is known as the dosage, or in an even fancier French term, it is apparently called liqueur d'expédition. Okay, so that is adding in that last little bit of sugar that is predetermined by whoever's making the wine based on what they think is going to create the best flavor and for the style itself. Now, this wine that we're just about to taste is a brut wine, which means it has 12 grams or less of residual sugar per liter. So this is actually still very much a dry wine. Okay, I'm gonna call this a medium yellow color. Let's give it a shot on the schnoz and see how we like it. Okay, I'm getting some grapefruit on the citrus side coming through here. Got a little bit of pear, maybe even a little bit of pineapple. Let's see what else is in store. those toasty, bready, kind of yeasty aromas are definitely coming through. Maybe even a little bit of cream. Let's try her on the jaws and see how we like it. Definitely have the pear and the grapefruit, some of those creamy notes coming through. This is a lighter bodied wine for sure. The acid is quite high on it. Alcohol is not very high, right? Like it's probably going to be around 12.5%. And then it does have, again, just a little bit of sweetness, but not much at all. Like 12 grams of sugar per liter is hardly anything. So definitely still considered a dry wine. As far as what I think about this, it has that mousse is incredibly silky. It's got also that really high acid, but incredibly well balanced because of that residual sugar. And then it's got like those nice concentration of fruit flavors. A lovely traditional sparkling wine with these just gorgeous round fruit flavors. This is absolutely delicious. This wine is, if you can't tell, I am loving this big time. So wine number 1 has come through for us. You are freaking delicious. Let's get into wine number 2. This is a 2016 Châteauneuf-du-Pape. This is a $55 bottle of wine. And if you remember back to episode, I believe it was 5, we tried another one of these wines. So this is our second shot at it. This particular producer is Domaine de la Charbonnière. And the grape varieties on this are 70% Grenache, 15% Syrah, 15% Mourvèdre. And these are 10 to 45-year-old vines coming from the Châteauneuf-du-Pape appellation in the southern Rhône Valley in France. Now, Châteauneuf-du-Pape means the Pope's new castle. And so this harkens back to some very interesting 14th century history if you want to go in and check it out a little bit more. But this area produces GSM blends. And that means they're made from Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvèdre. There are actually 13 total grape varieties that are allowed to be used in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, but Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvèdre are by far the most common varieties used. All right, they're all grapes, all 3 of these that thrive in warm, sunny areas and need that kind of heat to ripen properly. This area in the southern Rhône is even warmer than it should be thanks to a very generous helping of galets, which are these large stones that actually warm up in the sun during the day, and then they hold onto that heat and they radiate it back into the vines at nighttime. With these grapes in this Mediterranean climate, we would expect a blend of concentrated red and black fruit. It would have some herbs, probably some spices, and then also maybe some savory flavors from aging. Now, this is a 2016 vintage, and that puts us almost at 10 years after it was released, so we may well see some of those savory aromas. Let's find out. This is a deep ruby color. It has a garnet meniscus or rim to it. Let's see how it does on the schnoz. As far as fruit, what's sticking out to me the most is like a black plum. There's some red cherry in here, maybe even a little bit of like black olive. But there's something else in here, and I don't like it very much. It's almost like a mushroom, like fungal earth. What could we call that? I would say maybe 3-day-old forest mud puddle. Like it's not the most pleasant thing to me. Maybe other people enjoy that. I don't find that particularly appealing. But it's not like a wine fault. It's just not something that I fancy. But let's dip back in and see if we can sift through that and find anything else. Maybe a little bit on the herbal side, like some chervil, maybe a hint of something like fennel, but let's try it on the jaws and hope it's better there. Okay, the black fruit is coming through. Also some vanilla, which I didn't pick up on when I was just had it on the schnoz. Definitely earth is coming through, getting some of that like even tobacco, maybe a little bit of leather. It is very much a full-bodied wine. It's got a decent amount of tannins, but not a ton. I'd say probably medium in terms of acidity. It has got a lot of alcohol. You can just kind of feel the burn, as it were, and it's definitely a dry wine, not detecting any like sweetness in this. But this is not my favorite. This is not especially pleasant on the schnoz, in my opinion. It's bold and complex on the jaws, and that really makes for a nice experience, but the aromatics of it, just, I wasn't jiving with them. Now, part of it could also be that maybe it needs more time to open up. And the reason that I say this is back in episode 5, after I tasted that Châteauneuf-du-Pape, I wasn't thrilled with it either. And now we're 2 for 2, me not being thrilled, but something that I learned from the first one was, it was like the 4th or 5th day that I had that wine, I guess because it had more exposure to oxygen and just time to open up in a different way, I actually found it to be much more pleasant, both aromatically and on the jaws, on days 4 and 5. This does have great length, however. It's got a nice like earthy leather, tobacco, those types of flavors are kind of rounding everything out. So between these two wines, I mean, you're probably not going to be surprised by this, but hands down, the Crémant from France was absolutely fan-flipping-tastic. And this red, the Châteauneuf-du-Pape, I am not particularly a fan. I mean, it's a good wine, don't get me wrong. I'm going to finish drinking this glass for sure, but not my favorite. And this just goes to show, right? Like the first one we tried is a $20 bottle of wine, all right? The Châteauneuf from France is like $55, so huge spread in the price. I mean, you're talking $35 extra for a wine that, in my opinion, is not only not superior, but it is by far inferior to this white sparkling wine, this Crémant. So I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, and I will see you in episode 16.